to take this opportunity to introduce our roundtable members. Monica Hutchison is the board treasurer for Flow Free Foundation. Her involvement in the foundation stems from her passion to break the stigma around menstruation and to provide period equity across Arkansas and beyond. She hopes to be a voice and resource in bringing easily accessible period education and products to the community. Jacqueline Johnson is a nurse of 10 years and currently serves as a nursing instructor. Prior to teaching, she worked with the pediatric population in the hospital setting and as a school nurse. She is dedicated to promoting health and wellness education in our community and is particularly inspired to empower youth to learn about their bodies so they can make informed health decisions. Rivers Nicholas is a nursing major at the University of Arkansas with the intention of going to graduate school for women's health. Rivers is the president of the Sexual Health Outreach Organization, SHU, on campus. SHU provides comprehensive, unbiased, and inclusive sexual health education to the campus and to the community. SHU's mission is to destigmatize sexual health conversation and provide resources to everyone who needs them. April Roy. April is the founder and CEO of FemPAC. FemPAC provides accessible period care in every space menstruating bodies exist. Their mission is to improve health through products, policies, education, and community. April is also co-founder of FemHealth Founders, which empowers female founders to build and lead profitable, women-centric companies. Our moderator this evening is Dina Benbrahim. Dina is a multidisciplinary creative who uses an intersectional feminist lens to investigate design for visibility, civic action, and social justice. She is currently an endowed assistant professor of graphic design at the University of Arkansas. Stacy and I want to thank each of you panelists for being a part of this program. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Dina. Thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing us. I'm not sure if this is working, is it? Hello? Amazing. Thank you for introducing us. I'm really excited about this conversation. Quite a great panel here with multiple different views. So what I'm gonna do is ask 3 questions. We can deviate from these questions, obviously, but I want to anchor these questions in context. So I will do a little wink for the actual documentary we just watched. But really, I want us to focus also on the United States. So the first question is, I'll start with the context. I think this is a global health crisis, obviously. Gender inequality, discriminatory social norms, cultural taboos, and poverty contribute to period poverty. We see this documentary and it shows really the importance of collective action with folks getting together in this village near New Delhi, Kathikera. They're installing this revolutionary machine that manufactures sanitary pads out of natural, locally sourced materials at low cost. Incredible. And they're trying to sell these pads throughout their entire district, and we can see how much they're struggling. So my question to you all is, what is the place of collaboration in what you do?
I can go first. Do I need to talk into this? I'm doing just fine. So my company is a for-profit company, but I partner with a lot of nonprofits when it comes to menstrual equity. As a for-profit company, when you have investors, they could care less about the social impact that you are doing. In our company, the reason why we're successful is because of the impact we do. Investors just don't see it that way. And so instead of starting a nonprofit of my own, I decided to partner with other organizations like Arkansas Period Poverty Project, More Chances Period. I also partner with the Period, the organization as well, because I feel like collectively that's the only way we're going to be heard, like these women are doing. And so I think when it comes to hearing our voices around menstrual equity, what period poverty is, that's the only way we're going to be heard. There are more women in this state than men, but you can't tell at all when it comes to like the practices of, you know, our bodies, or when it comes to menstrual equity, period equity in schools. I mean, we got a whole bill passed to say, hey, here are funds that you can access to provide period products. We went so far to partner with the Department of Education of Arkansas to create a roadmap for school districts in order to learn how to access these funds. Ask me, are they doing it? No. And it's because I feel it's because of the stigma surrounding periods. And, you know, I was like, I talked to Representative Enid and I said, do I have to go to every school district to make my point on why they should be doing this? And so, you know, we can't do it by ourselves. Like having things like this, having panels, bringing people together so we can create a collective voice so our voices can be heard is the only way we're going to be able to get things done. That was
Thank you, April. No, that was great.
Can I be heard? I can be heard, can't I? Okay. To piggyback off of what you were talking about, my husband is actually a teacher in a local school district that has a very high poverty rate. And he actually stocks menstrual pads in his room because I think it's wonderful his students are comfortable enough to ask him. Now, they have a school nurse, and she has supplies available as well. And I think it's wonderful that he keeps it. But even in a district where he should know about these resources, we had no idea.
Really?
And so now I'm absolutely, and he has, it's just through the power of community and friends and like, you know, him and other colleagues taking turns that, okay, we're going to buy the pads this time, we're out again. So it's sort of just a natural grassroots thing, but it's just, you know, and especially in a state like Arkansas when there's so much rural in, where we're a mostly rural state with a lot of poverty, we need to make the most of these resources.
Yes.
So
The fact
that's really neat.
Okay, well, we're going to talk.
Thank you. No, we need to.
I'm baffled by
Because
that.
I donate things to his own, you know, to
And
his
I'm like,
school.
why donate when there
Right.
like access to
Yeah.
funding that schools
Yes.
have to provide these products?
Yes. And from my personal point of view as a nurse, I used to be a school nurse, probably my favorite job I've ever had. Love taking care of people in the community, getting to grow with kids and their families. You know, I was really the intro to healthcare for these kids, which is why I think school nursing is so valuable. A lot of people in healthcare are very adrenaline, you know, focused and either really enjoy science or adrenaline or people, and I say I like the boring soft skills, but it's really just that I like empowering people with knowing how you can take care of your body, especially with our youth, and it really is such a struggle, again, especially in Arkansas, to break through these taboos and get people talking, and now we have new legislation which is actually banning us from talking about. I have not gotten to read the details because I've been a little bit busy, but just that I know we are, you know, not even supposed to be talking about menstruation or puberty until they actually hit that age. Whereas I worked in a private school and public schools, and in public schools you have a puberty talk, you know, where you separate the boys and the girls and they learn about their bodies. But in the private school setting where we had a little more wiggle room, we would have a get to know your body talk. And it still really wasn't even enough. Because in a way the private school was, you would think they would have more opportunity to have more knowledge, but there almost was more taboo because, like I said, my husband who works in a public school setting, he has students who are comfortable to come ask him as a man for menstrual products, which I think is a wonderful tribute to the community he creates. But I was just so surprised in the setting where I was a nurse that there was a lot of giggling, just like where we saw. Now the taboo is not at that level, but there's still plenty of giggling and still a huge lack of knowledge. And parental involvement tends to be higher in private schools. And there was a lot of concern about exactly what are you going to talk about, you know, and it was just shocking to me when literally we are just talking about the body, what it does, how we can take care of it. But we still see that as almost a controversial topic, especially in a southern state, where I think we're heavily endowed with taboos about women's bodies and clearly. That just trailed off.
It's okay. I definitely agree with what y'all are saying about like the conversation. There's such a poor amount of conversation about this topic in specifically public schools. I mean, where I went to school, we had like one day they said you will bleed, and they were like, that's it though. Like it was a man that taught us, and then the whole rest of the semester we talk about drugs and nutrition, but at that point in time, you're not really doing drugs. You need to know how to take care of the things that are happening to you actively. And I think that even it starts in the home, too. I know, like, growing up, my family didn't talk about it. Like, I started bleeding, and I'm like, Mom, what's up? And she's like, I'll get you some pads, and that's, like, it. You're not supposed to ask your dad. You're not supposed to talk to your brothers. Thank God I had an older sister to talk to about it, but after that, it's like anytime you need something, you shoot them a text and then pretend nothing happens when they're under the bathroom counter. And I think that if we start talking about it more, like in the home and the schools especially, if they're supposed to prepare us for all of our life, like, experiences, then that's somewhere that they really have failed.
Yeah, I definitely feel, you know, just kind of echoing what you all said, is the stigma is definitely something I've seen all throughout my life. And, you know, when I was in middle school, I remember having the talk where the boys and girls would split up, and it was a very, like, vague conversation, like you said. And I was raised mostly by my dad, who was very much, you know, not interested in that conversation. And I had my stepmom and my sister there, and they kind of ended up being the people who could kind of help me through it. But there's definitely a stigma from even, you know, a family aspect, being raised more by my dad. And then in school, you know, it was definitely something you saw with peers and the boys in school and everything. I remember walking outside of in between classes, and one of my guy friends saw a tampon that was like new, like not even open, and he like ran away from it. So it's just kind of crazy how stigmatized it is, and that's why I joined Flow Free. One of the big reasons was just the stigma around it was so crazy. So joined Flow Free like 6 months ago, met April, and she focuses a lot on the stigma and just educating people and making people feel like they can be comfortable, you know, even having that conversation, whether it be a family member or a classmate or a coworker. And so that's definitely a big thing for us, for sure.
I love where the discussion is coming. Actually, this is a nice segue for the context that I'm bringing here. And then my next question. Are you ready? There's a few stats here. So according to Talk Poverty, Arkansas's poverty rate is one of the highest in the nation. It's ranking 47 overall and 48 for children experiencing poverty. We have young girls, students, people of color, undocumented immigrants, trans men, and non-binary folks who are the most vulnerable populations experiencing period poverty. In Arkansas, 2 in 9 women and girls between the age of 12 and 44 live below the federal poverty line. 1 in 5 women miss work, school, or similar commitments due to lack of access to period supplies, and this is not in India, this is here. They resort to degrading and unhygienic options such as cloth, rags, diapers, or paper as a substitute. Trans people are 3 times as likely to be unemployed and more than twice as likely to be living in poverty as a general population. And those who are disabled, especially if they are people of color or undocumented immigrants, are especially likely to be unemployed and living in poverty. And here we go, sales tax. Sales taxes on period products place a really huge burden on people who menstruate. And in Arkansas, period supplies are taxed as luxury products, so we can blame the patriarchy here, like we heard in the documentary, among multiple other systems. We have House Bill 1065. It was filed on December 31st, 2020, to exempt period products from sales and use tax, but it died in House committee on October 15, 2021. We started having a really juicy conversation here, and just adding this context to it, I want us to have almost a speculative moment where we try to think about a future with menstrual equity. Just let's try to imagine it. What do you think we need to get there?
I think that opening the conversation does like a very large part. I mean, as we saw in the film, like at the beginning, the men are like, I don't know, it's diapers, whatever. And at the end, when it's been talked about, they want to know how it's made, what their family's doing, and more about it. And so I think that like a large part of the problem, especially with the House bill, is our legislators are mostly men. And so if men aren't talking about it to the women in their homes, or they're not hearing about it repeatedly and feeling a drive personally to change it, then they're going to say, oh, period's gross, stop. And then they're going to vote it against it and not want to learn any more about it. So I think that like the best way to do it is going to be to put it in their face until they have something they have to feel about it to help make a change. Because in reality, it's not really affecting them. It's not putting any psychological stress or shame on them to have to avoid buying these products for their own health. So if they don't feel any sort of desire to change it for the women in their lives or the women in Arkansas, then it's just not going to happen.
And piggybacking off of what she said, as someone who helped part of a coalition to push for HB 1065, it starts at it's a tax thing, right? Tax Revenue Committee. They have the opportunity to end this tax. They don't want to end this tax because they're like, oh, this money. But if you really think about it, it's only like $2.3 million, I think, that they're actually earning from the tax on period products. Now, if we think about that, and there are more women in the state than men, that's a low number. That means people they can't afford to purchase period products because that number should be higher. And so that's a whole thing of itself. But I think what we're going to have to do is, I'm a person that calls out everybody on Twitter. I called out everybody that was on that tax committee, especially when the special session was coming. But like, I can't be the only one, you know. We have to galvanize and have people to contact their representatives and be like, why am I paying a tax on my period when y'all don't pay taxes on billboards in Arkansas? Which is more important, that billboard, or if 2 in 9 women are broke, like live below the federal poverty line, they broke. That means they can't afford to even purchase products, and they're making a choice between what I need to purchase for my kids versus can we purchase these period products. Now, we're also trying to create a bill so that SNAP benefits are used to purchase period products. But that's a whole nother story, and we need to call Bozeman, everybody. And so it's just like we have to say something. If we don't say anything, then it's just like we're all suffering in silence, continuing, right? Because that's what it is. I always talk about like the unwanted anxiety and the unnecessary stress that's caused by something that is so natural, but yet we deal with these things. I talk to women who don't even have a period anymore, but still suffer from the anxiety of that period because they had terrible periods, and maybe they saw it on somebody's couch, and now they won't sit on somebody's couch when they go to their houses, or they don't like to ride with other people because of what happened in their past. I've even had women to tell me, oh, April, yeah, my mom wouldn't have this conversation. She said, I can't talk to my dad about it. And if we do have pads, don't show that you're on your period. And she's like, I didn't even understand why this was happening. And all she was getting was, make sure your dad doesn't see it or he doesn't know it, you know? And she said, April, I taught that to my daughters, who then taught that to their daughters, who are now teaching it to their daughters. And so it's this long, unwanted cycle of stigma. And it's all done, like, we're in this situation where all these dudes are making these decisions about us. And it's like, we have to say something. Moms have to step up. We have to step up. Gen X, Gen Alpha, gonna have to be like, no, I don't want to pay a tax on my period. Because that's really what it boils down to, is like making these representatives and these legislators step up, because in reality, we're paying them to like make these decisions about us.
I'll continue if there are no more comments.
Oh, I think there's lots. I mean, we can do from just having those one-on-one conversations, you know, be it whether I was in my nursing role or as a fellow mom, you know, in schools, asking questions about what is your, you know, your policy about, you know, when even starting thinking about my 4-year-old, you know, when they're going potty, they start really separating the genders at that age, and they have communal bathrooms at the beginning, and at some point, once they hit elementary school, they have girls and boys, and that's when the kids start really getting interested in how their bodies are different, and so we can pay attention to the language, you know, that administration uses around their bodies. And I start to get real fired up, like when we start getting to puberty age and we start thinking about things like dress code, which I think are very much a patriarchy holdover that really gets my goat. Because, you know, I feel like that's when we start sexualizing particularly young girls' bodies and making it feel as if their body is something that's communal, that can be commented on. And yet here we are, you know, they have to hide their crinkly pads in their purse, you know, for this fear. I just feel like there's so much power that is taken from girls and how we are raised, not raising them. I don't mean to put the blame on that, but culturally how they're accustomed to being treated, and their bodies and how they're kind of a public space, and yet there's this one really shameful area that isn't supposed to be.
And I always tell people, you wouldn't be here without it, so why be like that? So,
Everybody comes out of one.
I mean, I think it's also harder for trans men and non-binary folks
For people with
who
uteruses, yes.
just experience gender dysphoria. So it's like another level,
Exactly.
another
Oh, absolutely.
intersection.
Because, I mean, it's pretty novel here in Arkansas to find a gender-neutral bathroom. You know, it's you know, it really sticks out to me when you're in a public space and you see one, like, we have some great restaurants around here who say, you know, bathroom for all, or, and that's a great small first step, but that's, like, so isolated.
And now they don't want it anymore.
Exactly. And again, it's some old men making these decisions who have clearly never been a father, like my wonderful husband, who's very involved, easily takes our children to the bathroom in public when they need. But that can start causing awkward situations as well. Whereas if we just had a gender neutral family bathroom, you know, that could be more inclusive. This is a tangent. Anyway, but just more welcoming spaces and encouraging speaking up, saying, like, you know, why don't we have these spaces?
My daughter is 9 and she knows all about a period. Like, she knows, like, she's waiting for it to happen. And so I just didn't want her to be in the same position I was as a kid, because my mom didn't talk to me about it. And there was a lot of like Menstrual MacGyver skills being used. And so I just don't want my 9-year-old to be ashamed about something that is going to happen to her. Also, when we talk about like the puberty talk, you know, I know someone who started their period at 8 years old, and you don't expect that. So what do you do with an 8-year-old? Like, that's why these conversations, they need to be had earlier. Like, kids need to know about their bodies and know that it is normal. There is no shame in who you are. And so it does start at home, I also think, but like if they were taught that, then it's like they're gonna put it off on their kids. I've had a lady to tell me she wanted to throw a period pad party, and I was like, oh, that would be awesome, because her niece, her mom died, and so she was being raised by her dad, and she wanted to educate her, and so they decided to have this period party, and you know, they got some other kids from the school, and then she got a call from some parents like, why are y'all talking about this? What is this period party? I don't want my kids to know about this. And she didn't understand like what she needed to do to continue this. And I was like, girl, keep throwing these period parties. Like, if they don't want them to come, that's fine. But I'll tell you, the other kids are going to make them want to come. Because they're going to talk about how awesome that period party was, and how much they got from it. And so, like, you're going to have those parents like, I don't want my kid to know about it, even though they're doing their kid a disservice. Because they're already putting shame on something that they don't even know about, but they know that they shouldn't be talking about this. And so, again, you know, for those of us who are willing to make that change, we just have to continue to be the change we want to see.
I'm so glad you brought up the period party, because I completely forgot. My only sibling is 10 years older, and even just that difference in age, generationally, we are very different in how we see what's appropriate to talk about in regards to our bodies. And I have a niece who is 16, and when she started her period, she was 12 or 13. And I knew her mom was going to do a great job of purposely trying to get outside her comfort zone and get her comfortable with her body. But I also liked still being able to say, hey, there's a great book, and it's that there in the back, Stacy has them set up. There's a particular one, The American Girl, Your Body and You, or something. But just like having that in your back pocket and knowing like, hey, there's this particular book that you can get on Amazon. Nobody sees you use it. You know, nobody sees you buy it in the store, you know, or you can come get it at the library. I liked being able to just like say, hey, there's this great book, and they have one for boys too. And then as a school nurse, I would do the same, but just knowing like public resources like that, you know, like take this, do with it what you will. You don't have to look me in the eyeball and say, you know, anything uncomfortable. And then I made like a little period basket for my niece, you know, that had like Advil and red themed products. But finding a way to celebrate that and change the feelings around it. While still trying to, you know, do it in small steps and slowly, like I said, rather than if I sat down and said the word vagina to my sister, she would just be lost for the rest of the evening. So having wonderful resources, I love seeing how many books there are out now, and that just this,
Just
you know.
sit down on the dinner table and say, repeat after me. Vagina.
Yes. Yes.
Another population we don't often think about are houseless, detained, and incarcerated people who face even more barriers to find or to access menstrual products. Arkansas does not have any laws to require shelters and correctional institutions to provide free period products. Most are forced to use toilet paper or rewear bloody clothes In 2016, New York City passed the first menstrual equity legislation in the country. And it does require public schools, correctional facilities, and houseless shelters to provide menstrual products. So if we have any legislators in this room, what message do you have for them?
So there's this, I follow this lady on TikTok. She talks about her, when she was in her experience in prison and what they had to do when it came to pads. First of all, they don't get the same pads we get. They're almost like panty liners, but bigger than panty liners. And she basically, first of all, she was saying that they only give them a certain amount, and because they're so thin, they're easily used. And so she said that she learned how to make a tampon out of the pad that she got.
That's brilliant.
Basically, she broke it apart and used every piece to make an actual tampon out of it. She felt that it made them last longer when they did that instead of just using them as a pad. But what I would say to our legislators, of course, like, what are they doing now for the women who are in prison? What are they doing now for those who are in women and children's shelters? I talked to some of those people, and they use cardboard sometimes, plastic bags sometimes, because they don't have access to toilet paper. They can't just go in the store and use their restrooms. And so we forget about that, right? Like, we forget that there's a whole other population that may be going through this as well. And so we have to think about it in cost, because that's what they care about. They don't care about people, they care about profits. And so what I would say is either take care of the problem in the beginning, or not having access to accessible period care can lead to much bigger problems for the state when they're in the hospital. So now you got to take care of people because they didn't have access to equitable period care. And so that's usually my argument. That's usually my argument with investors. I had a guy to tell me, I think he runs like some Fortune 100 company. I was pitching for investment, and he gets on and he was like, "Oh, April, such a great pitch. Sorry I'm running late, but I just have one question. Why should I care about my employees' periods? That sounds like a personal problem to me." Well, first of all, my face, Lord, like, but I didn't say what I was thinking. And so I basically was like, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I said, do you carry toilet paper with you, like, everywhere you go, in case, like, you gotta go? And he goes, "Oh, well, I think I got some in my truck." I wanted to say lies, but I didn't. I said, okay, let's go with it. Let's say you do have toilet paper in your truck. I said, you're out, you're going shopping, you're at the shopping center doing your thing, and you gotta go. I said, you can't go back to your truck, so you're gonna go straight to the restroom, sit down, do your thing, boom, there is no toilet paper. Ooh, it became a personal problem now. What do you do? And I said, well, hopefully you wash your hands, but you're gonna have to pull your pants up first. I said, hopefully you wash your hands and you have the opportunity to go home, take a shower, and change clothes. But think about those employees who only get 30 minutes for lunch, or who work in rural areas where there is no store down the street. So either you lose production for that day, and maybe tomorrow, all because you said, sounds like a personal problem, and you didn't want to provide access. And so he was like, thank you for that perspective. And I always tell people, I'm sure every time he goes to the bathroom, he thinks about it. because you really have, that's what they care about. They care about money, you know? And so it was really hard for me to pivot that way, because I start off with the impact of like helping all of these menstruating people and what that could do, and they don't care about that. They care about the bottom line. So it was really me putting in perspective how they were going to lose out on money, how they were going to lose out on production, and what they could do to help ease that. Like, why not stand for the employees you probably have the most of? So that's what I would say. Like, it's all about profits and like what they can do to make sure that they don't have to be out of money.
I like that your analogy is it shows them such short-term immediate goals of how they can profit, because I always go to the long-term goals of, yeah, if we don't support women and children in our state, if we think about our horrible infant and maternal mortality rate, especially with our women of color, you know, I think about the long term, like, you know, dead mamas equals a lot of money, you know, when we end up having more kids either in our foster system, or more people, you know, on WIC or SNAP benefits or Medicaid, and then they're stuck in these cycles of poverty that, you know, lead to incarcerations and lack of education, and you know, these are all profits. They're just too long term that we need, not arguments because these are valid, but something more real and in their face to help show how this is going to help now. Because we just really struggle to support women in early childhood in our state in general. It's
Even
hard
though
to
they say they love the kids.
Sure they do.
Any thoughts?
I just loved your analogy that you used too. I thought that was so good, because sometimes I do feel like it's really hard for people to empathize with like menstruators when you don't menstruate, and so sometimes you do have to use different examples like that, and I loved it, so I'm probably going to steal it.
And I'm always like, do you not care about your wife?
Right.
Do you not care about the women in your life? I mean, I've had a guy that told me he was over Techstars, and he said, "Oh, I can't judge this because, you know, I don't menstruate." And I was like, do you not have a wife? Do you not care about her and what she's experiencing? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But you're gonna have people who don't care about their wives. You're gonna have those. You're also gonna I've gotten older women to give me pushback. Why are we talking about this? Why are we having this conversation? That is on you. I had a woman to quote the Boy Scouts on my products. And all of the men basically was like, well, you're just making an argument for her product. She said, well, it's just like the Boy Scouts, fellas, always be prepared. And they were like, yes, that's what she's selling, always be prepared. But the fact that she tried to use that to justify why I didn't need an investment or why she didn't think it would be successful. But the fact that I couldn't get over the fact that she was a woman. Like, that felt this way. And so one of my advisors was like, well, April, you know, some women have this patriarchy overview. Someone has put it on them, and so now they put that off on other people. And so that same woman showed up at an event for our Fem Health Founders, and I mentioned it. I didn't mention her name, but I just mentioned the experience, and I mentioned, you know, we need to be mindful of what we say to other people. Just because we feel that way doesn't mean that everyone else feels that way.
Actually, Bourdieu theorized on this by saying something, I'm paraphrasing, but when the oppressor is oppressed and, you know, the oppressed becomes its own oppressor. So
Yes.
having women being soldiers of the patriarchy is part of that.
Oh, and then we know it's a lot of them.
Yep. I mean,
Definitely, because when I heard that, I immediately thought like, oh girl, what happened to you? You know, to make you, you know, become hardened and
Yes.
strong, you know, by some, but to have to then turn it around and be like, okay, you know, this is how essentially I was raised, and I either had to, you know, swim or sink and
Right.
to feel successful in this world.
And I would add, I mean, there are legislators who are women. There are leaders who are women, who are soldiers of the patriarchy. So not helping.
I mean, we see that now.
Yep.
Here in Arkansas, we see that, you know. But there are other people who are on our side who are also fighting the good fight. I like to encourage other women, other people to run for office. Like that, you know. Sometimes we get into this space of like, "Ugh, I don't want to have to deal with that. But then it's like, then we have to deal
Then
with
who's
it.
gonna do it?
And so, you know, again, it's all about being the change we want to see.
I guess I had one more question that I just reserved just in case we would, you know, not hit this point. So I'm just gonna add it and then we can call it a night, right? Because it's almost over.
What's that?
It's almost over. We're supposed to go.
Yeah, we have time for another
Okay.
question. Sure, go ahead.
So, always wrapping things in context, right? Administrators, I think, and I think you will agree with me, that it should be free to choose to participate in civil, cultural, economic, social, and political life without any restrictions or exclusions related to their menstrual cycle. So menstruators should be allowed to take charge of their bodies and lives. And I'm really using the word menstruators on purpose here. The FDA does not require companies to test for all harmful chemicals. You were just mentioning what's happening in, you know, prisons. It's like another level, another intersection. And they don't require companies to disclose these chemicals either in their products, which is something that we don't often think about. Research shows that many of today's menstrual and intimate care products contain a host of chemicals that are linked to unnecessary allergic reactions, cancer, infections, disrupting hormones. I've had to pay for it personally, and other medical issues like toxic shock syndrome. I learned about this when I was 25. So I guess I want to wrap this with this question. Any thoughts on how organizations and companies who are already starting to think about providing period products, how can we get them to think about what kind of period products they are giving away?
Oh, I'm kind of really excited about this.
I knew it!
You know, as a society, we're becoming more aware of what we put on and in our bodies, and you know, questioning the FDA and their standards and things like that. We have so many conversations around that. But I think the very idea of some of these products that exist show how closely tied patriarchy is to, I hate to use that word to like turn people off, but how women's bodies have been controlled and how they are supposed to be viewed and seen and smelled. Because if you go to Target or Walmart and go down the menstrual aisle, you'll have your pads and your tampons, and you'll have a whole host of soaps and scents and deodorants that are supposed to make the vagina more
Smelling
acceptable, yes, rather than a human body, you know, and I just hate that we think that is normal. That is something I loved to tell my girls in particular when I was talking to my like 12-year-olds in the school setting, is that first of all, you know, nobody's going to know you're on your period unless you tell them. Second of all, it's not your job to make your body more acceptable, whether that's using a deodorant product or shaving your legs. You know, I have strong opinions about shaving my legs. They're my legs.
Yeah.
And that extends to the rest of your body. And so I think it's definitely not, you know, encouraging, unless it's for like hygienic purposes, of course. You know, there are like towelettes for hygienic purposes, but getting fragrances out of things, things like douches, from a medical perspective, nothing should be going in the vagina except for a tampon. Because the vagina is just like a self-cleaning oven. It's very cool. It's the only body part in any gender that self-cleans itself. It does not need extra soaps, or you can get bad yeast infections, toxic shock syndrome, lots of cool things that we're also not educated about because we're just not educated on how to take care of our body very thoroughly, except, spray some Axe spray on it or spray some whatever brand of women's deodorant, And so I think it's just really, it's such a good reflection of what our society thinks of our bodies, and in what we should be questioning. Going back to the drawing board with all of these cool organizations of how we know we need to be offering things for hygienic purposes, and to support women, but we definitely need to be thoughtful about what we're offering.
I think that it's very important to pay attention to how things are advertised in that way. Any product that decides to advertise to men as a manly figure or to women as somebody that has to be just beautiful all the time is probably not putting the right things in their products, because your period product ads shouldn't be you beautifully dressed up walking around and all these beautiful lots of white clothing. That's just not realistic, and it's not a woman's job to be beautiful in order to have a place in the world. So it shouldn't have to be that you have to smell good or taste good or look good for your partner. You should be able to do things that take care of your own body in the way that they really need to be, but nobody talks about that, because what if my vagina smells like a vagina? That's terrifying, but it shouldn't be.
And then adding the layers too of inclusivity on top of that, of thinking about how alienating it must also be for people who are transgender, or we just have to think about it tends to be the people who have the most vulnerability that tend to be targeted, by our politicians. By society.
And our politicians.
And their politicians. But if we could flip that perspective and think about, what's going on with this population, they are actually really vulnerable. But yes.
As someone who work with other companies who are building solutions in women's health, I will tell you it is a very hard job for investors to wrap their mind around that this is not a niche. That we are half the world's population, they don't see it that way. The first thing we are always told, well, why don't you create this so everybody can use it? And founders are like, but this is not for everybody. This is for a specific group that needs it. Obviously, women. And so we're still fighting that battle to even say that we're equal. When we talk about research around women's health, when I say we're lacking, I think they didn't start doing real research until maybe the 80s. Oh, see? Okay, see? And so they're still trying to figure out that, a woman in the seatbelt is not the same as a man in the seatbelt. So there is so much that is going on when it comes to women, menstruating people, their bodies. If they're not listening just from this overview, how do we get them to listen? Also, businesses, they care about money.
Yep.
So they're going to buy the cheapest product to put in the bathrooms. And that's just what it is. And so we just have to talk to those businesses who want to see something different, right? Who want to enact change. Period is actually doing this program where they're partnering with businesses to create menstrual equity in those companies, like Pfizer and Sony are a few. But again, when it comes to them providing products, first of all, they don't want to anyway, but when they do, it's just like, what's the cheapest thing on the menu that we can buy so they can be quiet, Or the dispensers that are in restrooms, I'm like, who has a cord? nobody has coins, or they're either almost always empty or almost always broken. And so again, women, we have over 80% of consumer buying power, and that's where we need to hit them. Is in the pockets, because that's the only way they're gonna listen. I was reading this thing about Iceland, and so they don't do bank bailouts. So basically, they throw them in jail.
Wait, say that again.
In Iceland, they don't do bank bailouts. They throw them in jail if they misappropriate the funds. They have to bail themselves out. And they had it happen one time, and it never happened again after that. Because they basically made an example out of, like, we're not going to save y'all. Like, you put yourself in this situation. How can we help? And so I kind of figure, you know, as women, as menstruating people, contributing to society, that is how we're gonna have to show, like, okay, y'all don't want to do this. Who was it? Some country that women didn't have sex with the men, and the men were just like, oh, we gotta do something. You know, so it's just like enacting that wherever we can to say, hey, we demand change. We demand to be seen.
I do feel like this generation too does I think a really good job of, we're starting to hold more companies and businesses accountable and, you know, really calling people out. And I really love that is, you know, driving a change, which I wish that it didn't have to come to, you know, having to call everyone out publicly, but that is how it has to be sometimes. But an example that I like of a company doing something for menstrual equity is, I know that CVS passed something in, I think 12 states so far, where they're paying that, you know, extra tax for period products. And so that's one, you know, small step that we're, you know, taking, and, you know, us holding companies accountable, and, you know, companies wanting to change, you know, for the sake of menstrual equity.
Yeah.
So.
Even if it's ran by, like, so one of the hotels, we're in 2 hotels in Bentonville, and the hotel owner is actually a guy who doesn't have daughters, who also doesn't have sisters. And so I'm talking to him about period products and, like, why he should put them in his hotel. And he was like, hey, bro, I'm just gonna be honest, like, that's just something I never had to deal with. It, like, yeah, my wife, like, she got her period, but, like, you know, we never really talked about it. I said, well, how many women work for you? Are most of your employees, are they women? What do you do when they get their periods? Do you provide products for them? And he said, you know, I never even thought about that. Like, it never even crossed my mind. I was like, so maybe you lost production that day because somebody had to leave. Like, what is it? And right then and there, he made the choice to create menstrual equity in his hotels. Because not just for his employees, but for the women who would book in their hotels. So, it's really about educating. Education is key. I can tell y'all how many men I've educated around periods. I even go to this travel show the past 2 years, and the first time I went, total sausage fest, 90% men, 10% women, and the women that were there were there with their bosses. And so here I am talking about periods in this space, in the travel industry, where these men didn't even realize that women make about 64% of the global travel industry. But yet, there are no period products on planes. There are no period products in hotels. And some of the fanciest hotels, y'all, they have some of the nicest things. No period products. I had a lady to tell me she was at some 5-star resort in Aspen. She said, April, I thought about you because one of the ladies in our group got her period on top of the mountain. And she was like, and the resort didn't have anything for her, and they were trying to figure out what they were going to do. So, again, these spaces we exist tend to forget about us, but yet they want our money. And so, our goal at FinPac is not to put it on the consumer, but to put it on the businesses. To make them step up, to make sure they provide accessible period care, because it's not on us. If we're going to spend our money in your spaces, whether we're a mom at the zoo, at the museum, but yeah, we get our period, we're kind of SOL. And so, again, it's about making other people step up on why they need to do this. I always bring it back to money. So you're gonna lose out on some money because somebody gotta go. Like, you know, so it's just really, I feel like doing this, I've seen that that's all they really care about. It's like the bottom line, which really sucks. But I've learned to navigate that space and try to make sure we create menstrual equity, like any way I can to get them to understand.
We need to hear more of your stories so we can pass them on. Your analogies.
Yes.
We didn't even talk about, actually there's so many things that we didn't talk about. We can't cover everything in this panel. But I think, and I hope that this was, insightful.
I'm gonna go to our.
I want to turn it. I want to turn it to the public, maybe just for one question by the public, if anybody has any question, and then we can call it a night.
He has concerns.
Something I just want to share that I actually brought with me was a book that I don't know if the library has it, but it's called Woman Code, and I studied biochemistry in school, and I've always had really awful periods since I was 12, and this book completely unearthed all of the science behind how our bodies work and why we were left out of research and the implications of that on our bodies, and really helped me replay my health after struggling a lot through college with period pains and anxiety and all these other things that go along with having a wound. And I know it's called Woman Code, but it really is for anyone who menstruates. So yeah, she tries to be inclusive, I think, in that.
Thank you for sharing.
I love that.
That's very neat.
I would like to share something. I don't have a question. As men, I know whatever you guys said, I've been through. I've fighted for free products. I'm a student in NWAC. I'm a nursing student too. I'm giving free period products since 2019. I raise by myself to everybody. Every semester, I raise at least $2,000 period products. I donate to high schools, NWAC, and women shelters, mostly Veteran Cable and lodges around the thing. As you say, I have already period party. Every semester I have a period party. Every semester I have a period party. I organize. I'm the only man who does that. I'm the only man does that.
Awesome.
I'm the leader for the project, and I do that since 2019 spring.
Nice.
And as you said, the female doesn't have a pad. I have talked to a female. She buy a pad pack. Every time she have a period, she make it into half. She roll it in ice cream cube. Make it as the thread. She uses a tampon so that she doesn't need to buy more. So in a bag you have 24 to 36. So she used that for 3 months. But every time she opened up one, she makes it as a two. That was making me try. I'm from a culture from the video was saying I'm from Malaysia, but we brought up. I think I'm loud. So it's same culture, but I still remember the first time my sister told me to buy. I have 4 sisters, older than me. I was 7 or 8 years old. I still remember the story. My sister told me hey, go to the store, buy me this product, because females have the shy to buy the product, and men in the house doesn't go buy it. So kids, go to the shop. So we doesn't know what is that. So I still remember we went to, it's called sanitary pad, but I don't know. I thought it's a brain. I was just walking around like this, and my sister was like, "What you doing?" Okay, you told me to buy this. I was walking around. I didn't know anything. I was 7, 8 years old. So later on, when you go to high school and everything, you get to know about it. I was educated with that, and I was really happy to I'm a man who educated people. I educate a lot of people. I fight for them. NWAC have a free period product that I fight for a semester.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Authority man doesn't give a shit about this. I'm a man. Man who have authority doesn't give a shit about this, but as you say, you have a wife, you have a kid, but who doesn't have a kid? So wife doesn't care about. Not that they have a wife, doesn't care about it. They don't give a
Exactly.
shit about it. I fight for it.
Nice.
I was in student government. I would fight for it. I went to a nursing school. I was dispelled from that school because I was fighting for that. I don't want to say what school is that. So I came to NWAC and I fight for NWAC and they accept it till right now. NWAC have free products and every semester I do that. Even this semester I do that. I have my flyers.
Yeah.
I will pass it to you guys later. Every semester. My period party is May 12th. Yeah, so it's always good, as you said, men need to be educated. Even though if they get educated, they have their pride. They won't be saying that. They won't be accepting what they need to be accepting.
Right. And I think that the newer generation, like guys your age, younger, are more into a more equitable space. When we had our annual period march on the Capitol, like so many guys show up, like passing out, things, flyers, sign-up sheets, so we can like get the legislation in place. Like, we had a lot of guys to show up. So I think from, where I stand right now, that there's a new wave of men who actually care, who think it's dumb to not even include women at the table. And so at least we can walk out of here and be like, this dude is doing it. And so I appreciate that. Like, I appreciate the work that you're doing, because we need that. We always need allies.
Yep. Thank you so much for these comments. Thank you so much for this discussion. I hope it was insightful for everybody. I would like to invite the public and also y'all to just check out the books that the library was offering there and is offering there, and also the KIND period products. So the KIND project was a collaboration that I initiated at the University of Arkansas with graphic design students, fabrication students, and faculty, and also the public library here. And we use design and public spaces to normalize inclusive conversations on menstruation and increase access to period products in our community in what we say dignifying ways. So you can find menstrual cups, period underwears, 100% organic tampons, pads, and liners that can be compostable. And they are in some of these tote bags, and I assume there are more products that you can find either at the front desk or in the back desk. That's it. Thank you.
That was really cool how you wrapped it